Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm your host, Joshua Phillip.
And I'm Tiffany Meyer. Be sure to stay till the end of the show where we'll have a special announcement. But first, Josh, why don't you tell them what's happening in the world?
Well, the World Health Organization could soon have the power to declare pandemics and dictate America's health policy on these new policies. Now, this is if a proposal goes through, which is being worked on by both the WHO and the Biden administration. Negotiations right now are underway, but the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary, Javier Becerra, joined by WHO Director Tedros, has been working on a U.S.-WHO strategic dialogue, turns out, since September of 2022.
And this has resulted in an official announcement on February 1st, which says they've developed a, quote, platform to maximize the long-standing U.S. government-WHO partnership and to protect and promote the health of all people around the globe, including the American people.
Sounds about right? Now, it says as things now stand, the agreement could actually pass on February 27th. That's going to be if all 194 WHO member states agree to it. And this would also mean the WHO, folks, the World Health Organization, would be able to dictate global policies, including right here in the United States, on things like lockdowns, vaccine mandates, surveillance, and a lot of other things as well.
And here to speak with us more about this is Dr. Scott Atlas. He's an Epoch Times contributor, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution of Stanford, and a former advisor to the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Dr. Atlas, thanks for being here with us.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me.
To begin, tell us what's happening here. The Biden administration looks like it's going to help approve an agreement that would let the WHO declare pandemics and manage health policy. Is this really what's happening?
Well, there's been a series of meetings and a formation of an intergovernmental body that has talked about what kind of policies should be done to, to manage future pandemics, which are really, in some sense, good, but in most of the sense, bad. Here's what I mean. First of all, they have things like rapid and global access to data. I think in general that's good, and in fact, that's one of the failures of the WHO is getting the data out of China and the lack of transparency with the world very early on. There were delays in that. That needs to be fixed. But in other senses, I mean, there's some very serious problems. First of all, we can't trust the WHO. The WHO has been a failure, although it has had some successes, of course, in its 75 years. It's an agency of 194 member states, but they're very cumbersome in their execution of things. It's a very complicated organization. They were exaggerating the H1N1 flu danger. They were very slow in the Ebola issue. They've issued bizarre proclamations about cancer risks. And in this pandemic, they were failures. They failed to get transparency from China. In fact, they perpetrated the lie that China was being forthcoming early on. They said there was no sense to an idea of human-to-human transmission. They agreed with China with that for over a month. They said there should be no restriction of travel from China early on. And, they had a lot of problems with other things, including making erratic statements about what to do, basically not based on science. They changed the definition of something called herd immunity, and then they changed it back again from something that was conventionally accepted in biology for more than decades. So they wanted to push people to get vaccines. I mean, it's really a very dangerous thing for a sovereign nation like the United States to sign a legally binding agreement, which this would be legally binding. I don't know what the upside is for the United States to do this.
Well, I mean, this is the United Nations entity, the WHO. How is it legal for them to try to dictate U.S. policy? I mean, how does that deal with like state law, and how is it going to be legal for them to do this?
Well, it's not a if it's written to be an executive agreement, executive agreements are legally binding. That those are not the same as treaties. I think the people in Congress, most of them would want Congress to have to agree to it. I mean, that is the voice of the people, frankly, in a democracy, particularly specifically in the United States. But there are executive agreements that are signed by presidents that are legally binding. The Paris Climate Accord, I think, was an executive agreement rather than a treaty. Now, it depends on what's actually in the final language, but I'm very concerned, of course, because there's an issue when you look at the draft of the document as it currently stands. The terms shall and should are written as one or the other will be used. Should is very different from shall. Shall is a requirement. Should is a judgmental word. So, I mean, I just think it's very dangerous. Again, like, I don't know what the upside is in an agency that has been a gross failure in many ways in this pandemic. I'm not sure why we would want to assign anything like, for instance, some of the things that should be absolutely deal breakers would be the declaration of the public health emergency. I mean, that alone is a very controversial thing with limits that must be further put in on the United States rather than, subjugating American people to somebody else's definition of a public health emergency or a global definition of a public health emergency. That's not particularly appropriate for a sovereign nation. Secondly, there's an intellectual property issue here. Part of this agreement is there are words like, oh, we understand what the issues are for intellectual property preservation, but, and then there's some kind of a qualifier on how a certain percentage likely to be required to be given or reduced price. When you infringe on intellectual property, there's two things to understand. Number one, the United States is the main driver of new drug discovery, and intellectual property should not be really subjected to intellectual property cannot be subjected to international limits if you're in the United States. Secondly, when you infringe on intellectual property rights, you are going to harm innovation. I mean, that's fact. That's been shown over and over and over again. And if you want to make intellectual property more restrictive, you're going to have a trade-off with the development of important new innovative products. So I don't think, again, this is something the United States interest is served, and the interest of the public in America is served by undermining intellectual property rights in the United States. I think the other thing that needs to be mentioned here, if I can go on, Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization, has really been on the record since 2017, when you look at it, as constantly praising China,
stuff,
having
actually.
a personal relationship.
I know the CCP ties are a big deal. Yeah, CCP ties are a real big deal. But Dr. Atlas, you had to jump to the next guest. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Now, coming up, we have Turning Point USA contributor and political commentator Savannah Hernandez with updates from the ground in East Palestine, Ohio, where former President Donald Trump is giving supplies and also speaking with victims of the train derailment and the chemical spill. More of this after the break.
Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
NTD's Capitol Report. It's about getting answers, cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American? Congressman Graves, thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you are in the know.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At Entity Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Holding.
At The Nation Speaks, we don't just scratch the surface. We want to go wide and deep. Our viewers come away with a much richer understanding of the issues of the day. We really make a big effort to bring on different voices onto the show. We don't just talk to experts and newsmakers, which of course are extremely important, but we also want to hear from the American people. So the people who are impacted by the policies and issues that we're talking about, because what they
Let's go. Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer. Rising the song to the highest bidder. Got juice, got gas, I'ma move fast. New shoes, new tracks, like who's that? I'm new, come back, better than last. Yeah, it's a new me, never gonna look back. Never gonna look back.
Welcome back. The Biden administration has given actually very little response so far to the unfolding environmental disaster in East Palestine, Ohio. If you remember, a train carrying deadly chemicals, the biggest one being vinyl chloride, derailed on February 3rd, burst into flames, and then had its contents drained and then set on fire by emergency workers to contain the disaster.
As for aid, FEMA only announced it would send a response team after former President Trump announced he would visit the town. And today, Trump arrived with pallets of food, water, and other supplies for local residents. Joining us to talk about this is Savannah Hernandez, Turning Point USA contributor and reporter for Frontlines with Drew Hernandez. Savannah has been on the ground today covering Trump's visit to East Palestine. Savannah Hernandez, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Trump arrived in East Palestine today. What was the general response you saw from the locals there?
People were so excited to see somebody care about them for a change, because we know that the federal government has completely abandoned these people. So the happiness on the people's faces, right, the tears that were streaming down from the residents who genuinely just felt seen, felt appreciated, were excited to see somebody with leadership come and actually visit them and listen to them, bring water, bring food. President Trump went to McDonald's and he bought McDonald's for all of the firefighters and police officers in the town. So there was so much joy here. Something that, has not been present for the past couple of weeks as this poor town deals with the toxic derailment that has left them in this hazardous state.
And I know, Savannah, you actually spoke with President Trump today. What did he say to you? What did you ask him?
So I asked him what he would have done if he were currently in office, and he said that FEMA would have been here a lot sooner. And then I also asked him what his message to Joe Biden would be, to which he responded, he needs to be here now, get here now. That was basically what he said. And absolutely, a lot of the residents on the ground extremely upset at the lack of federal support. Pete Buttigieg nowhere to be seen. President Joe Biden was able to make his way to Ukraine on Monday. However, he has not been able to make his way to East Palestine. So a lot of the residents themselves bringing that up multiple times today.
And Savannah, you mentioned Trump bringing in water and even getting McDonald's for people. Do you feel it's enough, or what has the response been on the ground?
Absolutely. I don't even think, the people here really needed the McDonald's or the water. They just needed to be seen. They just needed somebody to come and actually care about them as American citizens. So I think that's really what today was all about. And just to give people a little bit of a background, Donald Trump really didn't publicize this. We didn't get press releases as reporters as to where he was going to be. It was really difficult for me even to find out when he was going to be in a certain location. So he really tried to keep this under lock and key because he wanted to speak to residents. He wanted to speak to people who were affected. He didn't want big crowds. He wanted to actually go into the community and, talk to the residents directly.
Given his speech there, what was the general tone? What was his main message he gave?
So basically, just that he's here for Americans, that the president that is currently in office needs to be here for Americans, needs to be on the ground, that the leadership is lacking very much so. And again, I spoke to a mother who lives 3.5 miles outside of East Palestine. And she was telling me that her stepdaughter has broken out in hives, rashes. She has experienced intense burning in her lungs. And this mother is saying, we went to the doctor. The doctor said, this isn't the first case we've seen. It's not going to be the last. So this is what small children and residents here are facing, are experiencing, and they still have zero information from the federal government. We still have the EPA saying that the air and water is safe. And mind you, I was in the area. The air smells toxic. My skin was burning today as the rain fell onto my skin. And I don't know if I'm being paranoid or not, but it's never done that before any other time I have reported in the rain. So most likely due to, again, the toxic chemicals that have been leaked into the environment over here.
And speaking on the political side, it seems this has been becoming a political issue. It looked like the Biden administration was not going to send a FEMA disaster response team, but they announced they were going to, but only after Trump made his announcement. Do the locals there view this as being politicized?
They don't view this as being politicized. They view this as, we need help. We are Americans, and the federal government has completely abandoned us. The message that they have for Joe Biden is, no more Joe. We don't want Pete Buttigieg to make his way over here. It was, former President Donald Trump who made his way over and actually spoke to residents first. And it wasn't until, like you said, Trump made that announcement that the federal government then came in and started to say, okay, we're going to make our way over. Okay, we're going to send FEMA down there. Okay, we're going to start making extra steps. So the residents are very aware of what's going on. This isn't a political issue for them. It's a health issue, and they just want the person who sees these Americans and is willing to take care of them and help them to be present. And right now, that is not Buttigieg or Joe Biden.
Hey, Savannah, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, we have Robert Patillo, a Democrat strategist and former congressional candidate, to give us his views on criticism that President Biden has been ignoring the people of East Palestine while providing aid to Ukraine. This and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. East Palestine, Ohio has become a focal point of the nation. Many local residents had to flee their homes and have struggled to cover basic living costs. Some have opted to sign up for $1,000 reimbursements with the train company involved, but at the cost sometimes of signing away legal rights.
Now with this, folks, some are looking to the White House, and with President Biden's recent visit to Ukraine to pledge more money to the war with Russia, Biden is being criticized for not doing enough for Americans. Now here to speak with us about this is Robert Patillo. He's a Democratic strategist, a civil rights attorney, and Democratic congressional candidate. Hey, Robert Patillo, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.
Now, local residents in East Palestine have told our reporters on the ground they're struggling to get by day to day financially. Do you think the Biden administration is doing enough to help them right now?
Well, I think the Biden administration has taken all the steps necessary within the power that they currently have. Now, what I do think is necessary is for Congress to act to increase our environmental regulations so that this doesn't happen again in the future, to increase OSHA regulations that have recently been pushed back that have hurt many workers nationwide, and also to launch investigations into our rail system, because we are seeing derailments at an increasing pace. We're now seeing 3 to 5 derailments per day in the United States of America. So what we're seeing for the Biden administration, they're using every tool within their belt. There's just not enough tools there.
And Robert, on that note, can you just expand really briefly what those actions are that the administration has been taking to help out these people locally?
Certainly. Governor Mike DeWine, the Republican governor of Ohio, had a press conference earlier today saying that President Joe Biden gave him a call and pledged that if there's anything that is needed by the people of East Palestine or the state of Ohio, that the federal government is at his disposal. Governor DeWine stated that he did not make that phone call yet because they've sent the EPA there to do ground, water, and air testing for the environment. They've sent National Transportation Safety Board inspectors to that rail section to determine the exact cause of the crash. They're also going to be making a determination through the Department of Justice whether or not any federal laws were broken by the train company in the way that they were transporting or the way they were maintaining their trains. So these are the things in the tool belt of the Biden administration thus far to do, but I think Congress has to work to stop this from happening going forward. The AFL-CIO recently released a study saying that 340 workers a day die in American factories, and this is because we don't have the type of regulations necessary to protect workers or to protect communities.
You know, one of the big political narratives going around right now is that while Biden is pledging more money to Ukraine, they say he's ignoring the needs of Americans. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
No, not at all. If you think about the American military budget, we spend nearly $1 trillion a year on the military in this country. The aid to Ukraine is about $100 billion thus far, much of it in loans that will be repaid. We are just getting lend-lease loans paid back from Great Britain and Russia as recently as a couple years ago from World War II. If you compare that to the money that President Biden has invested in the American people, $1.7 trillion in infrastructure spending in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, another $1.5 trillion in spending for the American people, and the Inflation Reduction Act. We saw the omnibus spending bill, $3.5 trillion invested in the American people. So this idea that $100 billion in defense of Europe is taking away from things that are going to the people of the United States of America is only being pushed by the same people who promoted a $1.7 trillion tax cut that was never paid for the wealthy instead of investing that in the American people.
And on that note, Robert, can you just sum up what is the importance of supporting Ukraine for Americans? Because it seems that's been muddled lately.
This is nothing short of the freedom for the ensuring of the freedom of the free world. What will happen if Ukraine falls is you'll see the strengthening of the quote-unquote Warsaw Pact, the resurrection of that. You'll then see Russia go into Moldova, where they just sponsored a military coup this last week. That will then put in danger Romania, which is the next domino which may fall. So what Russia is attempting to do is get control of the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, Ukraine so they can spread their hegemonic sphere of influence, particularly in the Balkans and then in the Baltic regions of Estonia and Latvia. So if we don't stop them in Ukraine, they will continue to come. We've seen this in 1993, the launching of the Russian invasion of Chechnya. Then they came right back in 1996. Then in 2008, we saw the invasion of the Republic of Georgia. Then in 2014, we saw the beginning of this incursion into Crimea. And now in 2023, we're seeing the invasion of the mainland of Ukraine. There's nothing to indicate that Russia will stop if we do not stand up for them in Eastern Europe. So we don't want the war to be here. We have to fight the war there.
Now, when it comes to East Palestine, if you could give the Biden administration advice on the response, would you change anything? And what do you think still needs to be done?
Absolutely. I think Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has to understand that he is not the vice president. He is not running for president right now. He does not need to be speaking on every single thing that the administration does. He has to be focused on his job as transportation director. We saw the crisis at the airports around Christmas that the Department of Transportation was caught off guard on. We know that the rail system in this country is severely inadequate, where they're using brake systems developed during the Civil War. He has to start showing that he has his head in the game and that he's actually going to do his job before he starts seeking his next job. So I think Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has to do a better job of being laser focused in on his work rather than trying to position himself for 2024.
And Robert, you mentioned earlier how Congress could and should do more. So what would that look like?
What it will look like is more regulations on our rail system. We saw just last fall that the Biden administration, the most pro, quote-unquote, union administration, had to kowtow to the rail industry because they have entirely too much power over the supply chain and logistics of the United States of America. We may have to look at antitrust regulations of the rail companies that have consolidated in recent years, choking out competition in the market. We are going to have to pass new regulations with regards to trains, modernization, braking systems, guidance, those sorts of things, because what we're seeing is 3 to 5 derailments per day. Well, before we could even clean up East Palestine, outside of Detroit, there was another train derailment with dangerous chemicals. So we need the wholesale regulation of this industry that have been getting away with everything they want for far too long.
I guess 20 seconds, any last notes you think people should know about East Palestine?
I think that people need to do everything in their power to support those people, sending donations. Various nonprofits I work for are sending water, they're sending food, and make sure you get in contact with people who are trying to help the folks on the ground there. This shouldn't be a political issue, it should be a humanity issue.
Hey, Robert Patel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Folks, coming up, we have Tony Cardwell. He's the president of a rail union, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees. We'll discuss whether the Biden administration shutting down a rail strike and concerns raised by the rail unions had any impact on the train derailment in East Palestine. Don't miss it. That's coming up after the break.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased. and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Welcome back. Less than 2 months before the recent train derailment and chemical spill in East Palestine, Ohio, President Joe Biden shut down a looming rail strike. He made it illegal for rail unions to hold strikes. Now, that took place as workers are raising concerns that policies were putting heavy stress both on themselves and on the trains they operate. Yet, did this actually have an impact on the recent derailments?
Here to speak with us about this is Tony Cardwell. He's the president of a rail union, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees. Tony Cardwell, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
To begin, what role do you believe the Biden administration shutting down the rail strikes in any way contributed to the train derailment in Ohio?
I don't necessarily think that the rail strikes are what contributed, that the shutdown of the rail strikes contributed to the situation in Ohio. I think it's more the deafness of so many people, including the railroads themselves, of not listening to the warnings that not just not the union leadership, but the workers have continued to complain about, the employees that have been overworked, the cuts and the major cuts in the rail industry. There's been about a 40% reduction forces for the car knockers, for example, and the carmen are the ones that take care of and inspect for the wheel situation that, was primary to the cause of derailment. Their workforce has been diminished to, by 40%, and yet, the rail industry was operational without the type of inspections that should be done on these type of things. And so this is probably most likely what contributed is just the operating system for the railroads. It's called PSR, Precision Scheduled Railroading, and ultimately what it's doing is they're reducing the workforces to levels that that it makes it very difficult to maintain the track structures, to maintain the cars and the units that operate on the tracks. And I think that's probably could easily be contributed to this issue. The strike, I don't think that you can make that link, and I don't think that Biden or the previous administration should be the ones to take blame on this issue. I think it should be focused where it should be, and it's the railroad's operating systems.
Actually, I've raised the issue of PSR before as well, and in terms of the stress on the rail workers, on the trains. What were some of the main concerns from that as it relates to PSR, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, so there has to be regulation, and I am glad to see that the FRA and the DOT came out with an announcement, I believe it was yesterday, in where they plan on, putting some regulations back onto the railroads. See, the railroads regulations, they tend to go away and then they come back, and then they go away and come back based on railroad behavior, and this has been the case for many, many years, and the railroad's behavior and conduct with the PSR operating scheme has been devastating. There's nearly 1,000 derailments a year. The unfortunate thing in this situation is there is a derailment with chemical cars in a city. This is, if a airline industry were to have 1,000 plane crashes a year, the regulators would go nuts. And so I think it's ultimately important for the regulatory agencies to really step in and enforce regulations and put new regulations on the railroad that are necessary. One of them is a manpower issue. There's a huge shortage of manpower. We are severely overworked. Our members are working, it's not uncommon to work, 16, 17-hour days for my members, and to work sometimes 7 days a week. And so you have this immense amount of burden that's being put on them and their families. In addition to that, you have this problem with a lack of manpower to get proper inspections done and proper, so you're feeling rushed and you're feeling forced to do the work to get it done and, make sure you check off the box at the end of the day. And you're quite frankly, in all honesty, it's probably not getting done at the level of attention that should be given to those inspections and those details.
And on that note, Tony, it's coming out now that the Ohio train's cargo had not been classified as high hazardous material. Was that unusual?
I'm not a specialist in this field, and I cannot comment on this particular issue. It does seem unusual just from what I do know, but I can't claim that, that's something that shouldn't happen. I don't have the specialties to make comment on that.
I know it's being politicized kind of on both sides. I mentioned, the criticism against Biden. On Trump, he's being criticized for repealing an Obama-era policy that requires certain electronically controlled brakes on trains carrying hazardous flammable commodities. Would you say it's accurate to blame Trump for that with that rule?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've heard it both ways, and everyone's looking for a fall guy. If we focus on Biden and we focus on Trump, we're missing the mark here. The regulatory agencies have to enforce regulations. Some of the regulations probably should be renewed, and if that was withdrawn from, if Trump policies took that regulation away, and it's important, it needs to be put back in place. And so everyone's looking for a finger to point. The thing that should be put on trial is precision scheduled railroading, and that is the railroad's operating systems, which have absolutely diminished the workforce. It's diminished a lot of the safety aspects of railroading, and deregulated. They have a responsibility to do some regulation on themselves as well. And they have to uphold that. Oftentimes right now, what our members are doing and other members from other crafts is they're doing a lot of on-time repairs instead of preventative maintenance. And when you're fixing a defect where a rail is already broken, for example, that's well beyond the time that you should fix it. You should be fixing those rails when you do tests on these rails and find that there's cracks and stuff in the rails. Now, that's not what caused the derailment, but that's just one example. They should be doing preventative maintenance on cars and on trains, in units, and on the track and on the signal systems. And we're not. We're all so far behind. The workers are so far behind in work that we're doing just on-time repairs. So like if it's either shut down the railroad or fix the repair now, that's not the type of way that the railroad should operate. For years, we did preventative maintenance where we go out and fix things that are starting to fall into disrepair rather than going and fixing it when it's completely destroyed. And so I think if we get back to that level of maintenance, it makes our community safer. And by the way, the general public should have an interest in this because it obviously, given the circumstance, there should be public outcry that the railroads maintain their track structures and their cars, maintain their cars, maintain their units the way that they should at a higher level. There's no doubt that should be happening, and it's not. And it's the operating system. It's not any particular person that you can point a finger at. It's the way that they're all operating. It's driven by a Wall Street agenda to make the maximum profits and reduce the workforce and reduce the cost as much as possible. And that's not safe for you. That's not safe for me. That's not safe for all of the general public. And so, we got to get serious about this.
Well, Tony Cardwell, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again.
And coming up after the break, more details on what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. That's from newly disclosed court documents, and House Speaker McCarthy reportedly handing over thousands of hours of footage to Fox News' Tucker Carlson. We'll be hearing from January 6th defendant Will Pope, who's defending himself against the charges he faces linked to the Capitol breach, and filed the latest court documents. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back. 41,000 hours of footage. That's reportedly how many hours of Capitol surveillance footage from January 6th that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has handed over to Fox News host Tucker Carlson. That's according to a new Axios report.
Now, as Tucker Carlson's team combs through the footage, this comes as more revelations are actually coming to light. According to newly disclosed court documents, get this, 3 undercover Metropolitan Police Department officers joined the march of protesters up the northwest side of the Capitol on January 6, including one who walked behind Ashley Babbitt, who was shot, of course, and killed, and predicted that, quote, someone will get shot. Now, joining us to discuss these latest developments is January 6 defendant Will Pope. Will is serving as his own attorney to defend himself against federal charges that he faces now linked to the Capitol breach. He also filed these latest court documents. Hey, Will, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, good evening, Josh. Pleasure to be with you.
So tell us first, what's in these new court filings?
Well, Josh, I've been engaged in a month-long battle with the DOJ trying to get full access to my own discovery. They're trying to prevent me from seeing what is in the evidence, and currently I only have access to less than 1% of the total discovery. So I filed several different documents related to that, and the most recent one on Friday, I included evidence showing that the DOJ has been trying to prevent me from not only accessing my discovery, but from using an entrapment defense in court, which I haven't even brought up to the court yet. Not that I don't have the right to do that, but they are trying to preempt that. And I showed several examples and released exhibits, video exhibits, showing some questionable things about DOJ conduct in Washington on January 6th. We know Michael Sherwin, the lead prosecutor who launched the shock and awe arrest of January 6 defendants, he was there undercover in Washington. Video also shows undercover DEA agents. And of course, I referenced the video that shows undercover MPD that are urging people to go up the northwest steps of the Capitol toward the Capitol. And that is true. The video shows that, but the government is keeping it under seal, trying to hide it from the American people.
And Will, tell us about the decision to act as your own defendant.
Well, you know, like a lot of January 6 defendants, I don't have the resources to get a high dollar attorney. I did have 2 court-appointed attorneys. My last one, he'd never really even used a computer. He's an older attorney, didn't have computer skills. And so I had to make the decision to represent myself and get access to the discovery. And that's a big decision because I'm not an attorney. You know, I have had quite a bit of education, but I'm kind of teaching myself as I go. And I'm trying to make good arguments the best I can.
Well, you know, Tucker Carlson came out recently on his show and he announced that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has now handed him over 41,000 hours worth of footage. What do you think of this? Is this going to help your case? Where are things at with it?
You know, I'm in favor of shining any light that we can on what happened. Personally, I think this should be released to the American public. That's not my decision to make. But, you know, hopefully Tucker can do a good job with it and get a story out there. But I do think eventually, and hopefully sooner than later, this should get out to the American people and be available to other media companies to use.
Well, and on that too, you know, what you're saying is that information is actually being denied from you. You said you're not able to get proper discovery. You said 1%. What are you being told with this? What's the reasoning?
Correct. Well, they've classified discovery in different ways. They've got sensitive and highly sensitive, according to the government. And the government doesn't want defendants to have access to the highly sensitive, which a lot of that's just video, you know, showing people walking through the Capitol. And a lot of that video is related to my case. And I need to have access to that to make work product and to prepare exhibits for my defense. And I have a right to the discovery, according to the Constitution and the rules of evidence and the Ferretta ruling. But the government is fighting it. They're putting enormous pressure on my judge, Judge Contreras, So I don't know how he'll rule, but I feel like he's a good man, but I do understand they're putting an enormous amount of pressure on him.
Well, given this pressure, about 30 seconds, do you say the political pressure, have you seen any evidence of this, that this may be influencing some of the trials, or is this just not happening?
The more recent evidence that came out?
Just in terms of political pressure, do you see political pressure impacting some of the cases?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this has been a political prosecution from the very beginning. They've been targeting American people that were entirely peaceful. And in fact, the prosecutor in my case told me on a phone call I was entirely peaceful, which of course I already knew, but they're still prosecuting me, and I'm facing a total of 30 years of federal charges. So it's ridiculous. I was entirely peaceful, and yet they're trying to hold this over me my entire life. And of course, I'm going to fight that.
Yeah, well, Will Hope, thanks for being here with us. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you, Josh.
Now, up next, we're joined by Jenna Ellis, Epoch Times contributor and also former senior advisor and counsel to President Donald Trump. She'll be talking with us about 2024 and the growing pool of Republican candidates running for president. Don't miss it. That's coming up after the break.
The lasting beauty of realistic oil painting. Brilliant, expressive, and inspirational. The 6th NTD International Figure Painting Competition. Guided by pure authenticity, beauty, and goodness. Invites you to join us on a journey back to traditional art. The Gold Award is $10,000. For more details, please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
Freedom is not free, and neither is the truth. In order to bring you the facts, our reporters are out there on the front lines getting the true story. Some of them served 10 years of prison in China. We've been censored on social media. Our Hong Kong printing offices were set on fire, and we've been repeatedly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party. But no matter what, we believe that you deserve the truth, and so we'll continue to bring the truth to light. Head on over to getepic.com and try honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
NTD's Capitol Report. It's about getting answers, cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American? Carson Graves, thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you are in the know.
Welcome back. The United States is gearing up for the 2024 presidential elections. Joe Biden, as the incumbent, is going to be facing off with a growing number of Republican challengers. And while former President Trump is leading in the polls, others believe they have a better shot than he does.
These include Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former Vice President Mike Pence, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and a newly announced run by author and political activist Vivek Ramaswamy.
Now, here to talk with us about Ramaswamy and the upcoming debates for the 2024 elections is Jenna Ellis. She's an Epoch Times contributor and a former senior advisor and counsel to President Donald Trump. Jenna Ellis, thanks for being here with us.
Great to see you both. Thank you.
Now, Vivek Ramaswamy just announced his run for president. What's your impression of his campaign and what's his message?
I love his message, and that's really one of America First 2.0. What he's saying is that we need to harness the principles of the original America First movement and take them forward into 2024 and beyond. And so he's really put forward a message that truly tries to reclaim the American identity, to stop all of the woke ideology, and to say that we need to focus on the what and the why of America first, not necessarily the who. And I think that this kind of coalesces really the issues that are facing America today and what I think a lot of people in the base really want to hear. And now, of course, full disclosure, I've been a personal friend of Vivek Ramaswamy for a number of years. I know him personally. I think he's really fantastic in my age group as a millennial. I love to see him jumping in the race and really taking the torch of liberty and running with it, not just waiting until the older generation passes it down to my generation and beyond.
And Jenna, going into 2024, what do you see as the main talking points for candidates?
Well, I think that Governor Sarah Sanders articulated it best in her response to Joe Biden's awful State of the Union when she said this is normal versus crazy. That was a perfect encapsulation of everything that conservatism stands for, that is premised on values, on principle, on genuinely what is normal, versus the crazy, versus what we've seen from the Biden administration that is an utter disaster, that's focusing on identity and diversity metrics and diversity hires and the woke ideology and CRT and ESG and all of these other things in the marketplace, rather than focusing on what it means to be an American and why we have to be America first, especially with what we've seen just in the last few days with Joe Biden going over to Ukraine and saying that apparently now we're supposed to call him President Bidensky rather than Joe Biden. And yet we have President Trump, who's actually going to East Palestine, Ohio, and giving tangible help to Americans on the ground facing that crisis. That is the most and best picture of a contrast between what it means to be a conservative and America first versus what it means these days to be a Democrat and focused just on foreign aid and this sort of globalist utopia that really leaves America behind.
Now, it looks like right now like Trump is leading in the polls. There's, of course, a lot of debate on him, as we'd expect, and how well he gets on, particularly with the Republican Party. There's even talk that he might be forced to run as an independent. Do you think there's any credibility to that claim?
I think it's way too early to count President Trump out. And, we've seen these tactics from some of the establishment never Trumper rhinos and the fake news media that always wants to bet their hand against Donald Trump. And he always comes back and shows himself that he's the winner and the champion. So I think that we can't count him out here. And certainly it's far too early in this primary cycle to even suggest that he may be looking to run as an independent. And he is leading the polls. The Trump War Room just tweeted out earlier today that he has about 50% of the Republican base in the latest poll, with all of the other candidates splitting it. And I think the next front runner is Governor Ron DeSantis with 30%. So a double-digit lead there by President Trump is really, I think, says it all.
And Jenna, on the flip side with President Biden, there's been rumors that some Democrats don't want him to run in 2024 and that others like Governor Newsom in California might run instead. How likely is this?
Well, unlike the GOP that has a wide and deep base, and I'm really grateful to see people like Vivek Ramaswamy enter, I hope that Governor Ron DeSantis does enter because we have a deep bench as a GOP party. But on the flip side, who do the Democrats really have? And I think that they are facing an identity crisis of their own. When you saw just earlier today, President Bidensky is still tripping up the stairs of Air Force One. He's clearly not competent to handle another 2 years in office, much less another 4 years after that. So I think it's very interesting that he hasn't announced his reelection campaign, and likely the Democrats are calculating that, and they're seeing that his approval ratings are tanking and his administration is not doing a good job. So I would not be surprised to see them put up someone like a Gavin Newsom or, maybe a Michelle Obama. We've seen a lot of other names floated, but I think the Democrats would be wise to put up literally anyone besides Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, Jenna, interesting times we're in. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us. We have a special announcement, actually.
On that note, this will be the last episode of Newsmakers, but it's going to be back soon in a different form. You'll be seeing less of me, but much more of Josh.
Yeah, you'll see her on her own show. But my own show, Crossroads, is going prime time in just a few weeks, just like right now. We'll be taking the best practices from Newsmakers, bringing those together with the best practices of Crossroads, and I think you're really going to enjoy the new show. Again, Crossroads prime time should be launching in just a few weeks right here, and we should have updates on this pretty soon.
And until then, thank you all for joining us and tuning in every week. We wish you all a good evening.
Hey, good night, everyone. See you soon.